everybody. I'm really excited to do this, to talk to Monica, because she has such an interesting story. I just want to start off, Pope has been elected from Chicago. He is. He's born and raised in Chicago, first American Pope, I think, in traveling, but he's been all over Europe anyway. But I think it might have been one of the shortest votes ever at the conclave. So, all right, welcome everybody. Monica, thank you so much for coming and sharing your story. I know that a lot of people here are so interested. And your path to me is just fascinating because I know that you started out, you were a nurse when you came here to Minnesota. So you were a nurse and then you decided you wanted to maybe do something else. And then you did an internship, right, with Dayton Hudson.
Right.
So you started that and you were writing speech writing, but you learned a lot from the gentleman that you worked for. Started speech writing. And then you started a marketing agency.
Right.
And is that how you went into, by doing all that, is that how you moved into maybe product development?
Yeah, so I worked for Dayton Hudson, which was the parent company of Target, as a speechwriter for a guy named Bo Sells. And the reason he liked me was I was from Iowa, he was from Iowa, and he was in charge of entrepreneurship, which is creating strategies within these big corporate behemoths. And so I was his writer. We traveled across the United States speaking to different divisions. And I just learned a lot from him about business, about startups, and it was really fun. And then I went to work for an operating division of Dayton Hudson that they shuttered. And that was kind of a startup. And my boss told me when I left, she said, I can't save you. If this fails, you're done. So that's when I started my own business freelancing and ended up partnering with a creative director to start a marketing agency. And most of our work was with Target. So we worked on a lot of consumer brands.
Tell us about when the idea hit you for Caldria, and I know that Mrs. Meyer's kind of spun off from that too, but when did you come up with this idea?
Honestly, it was a eureka moment. So I was in a big box store in Atlanta. They're probably all dead by now, Bed Bath & Beyond and Linens and things. And I saw this wooden pallet of cleaning products on the floor, and they looked like military hardware. They were neon, they had these big nozzles on them. And I remember turning going, oh my God, that whole category is pathetic. It's toxic, it's tired. And I kept thinking, why can't it be like Aveda? Why, I know a lot about Aveda. I used to work with a lot of creative directors who worked over there. And I thought, why can't this be awesome? And so I got on the plane from Atlanta back to Minneapolis and I still have this little sheet of paper where I wrote down the entire business plan, what that should be like. Consistent fragrances, dominate the category, just own this. Like no one's really done that before. Maybe like a beauty product for the home. That's kind of how I think about it.
So what gave you the confidence? I mean, how did you know, or did you even just go on blindly? How did you know the market was ready for something like this?
Well, I didn't go blindly, let me be honest. Well, one thing I saw in the marketplace is that the consumer was eating organic food. So she was changing what was in a refrigerator. Then it went on to the skin, then she was like, oh no, now I've got to have, earth-friendly skin products. So to me, the natural next movement was household cleaning, pet care, anything that involved the home was going to be earth-friendly, non-toxic. And then I thought, why can't you add fragrance? And I kept thinking about all the beauty products. They have consistent fragrances. So I thought across the board, your dish, laundry, hand soap, all of that could be one fragrance. So it was more of just watching the trends to see what was going on.
So you're a trendsetter, starting with this. So what kind of resistance, or did you meet resistance? Starting out with people. But I like one of the things that you said, no is the beginning of a conversation. I just love that.
Because most investors told me no. And I'm going to be honest, all those investors, I think somebody up here at the last panel on 11 said there was no ecosystem. So keep in mind, I was out raising angel investors in the year 2000, where honestly, I'm going to be old white guys giving out money. And most of them said, I wish my wife was here. And I was like, me too, didn't do it. I'm so desperate for money. So I learned a lot about investing. It was so sad that a friend of mine who belongs to a very wealthy parish, he gave me the church directory. And said, why don't you start calling the list? I did. I was like, I'm going to have to cold call everybody on this list. I need some money. So I met a lot of resistance. Like, I tell the story on a plane with a guy. He had his fourth little bottle of Maker's Mark, and he said, what are you doing? I said, I told him what I was doing, and he goes, oh, Procter & Gamble will spill more than you'll ever make. So there's not a lot of encouragement.
What kept you going?
I just knew it would work.
You felt it.
I just felt that. I thought this is going to work because the category was big. It was a $10 billion category. And at the time, a lot of consumer brands were ripping off premium corners of big commodity categories. It was happening in coffee, hair care, dog food. I mean, keep in mind, this is 15 years ago. Now these products are oversaturated, in my opinion. But that's the other thing that I saw was no one's figured this out for cleaning products.
Yeah.
It's big enough. I thought, if we just tear up a little corner, we'll have a sizable business.
Is that why you went for like the higher end Caldria first?
Yes.
So you wanted like that little niche kind of area.
Yes. Well, honestly, Amelia, I was afraid of the grocery market. I didn't understand the grocery market. I didn't have the dollars to compete at the promotional dollar. And I wanted to make all the mistakes at the high end level before we created a mass brand, was kind of how I thought about it.
So how did you get your big first investor then when you were going out and you met with a lot of notes and people kind of like, I don't know if that's going to work or not?
Well, so we raised about $800,000 the first round, and I was really looking for anyone who knew how to put a liquid in a bottle. And believe it or not, Minneapolis is rich with that kind of information because of 3M, Eco Lab, Minnetonka Brands was here. There was a shampoo company. So I found someone to invest for the first round, and the second round was after we landed a big private label contract from Williams-Sonoma. And that investor knew Williams-Sonoma very well. He knew what they could do. And Williams-Sonoma, a lot of people told me, Monica, you're crazy. Don't do that. It's private label. It's dirty. It's low margin. And I thought, all boats float in a rising tide. I thought, if Williams-Sonoma can say we're going to sell dish soap for $7.99, we can sell dish soap for $7.99. I thought it was a cachet play to have Williams-Sonoma. So that was really not only cachet for our brand, but also money. But they came to us with a significant amount of private label work, and that really turned out to be our financing vehicle for the life of the company. And so Mrs. Myers was a little different animal. Once we kind of got up and running with Caldria and private label, I saw very quickly that someone was going to knock us off in the marketplace. And I thought, no, they're not going to knock us off. We're going to knock ourselves off. So that's kind of what we did. Is we, I had a boss who always said to me, Monica, saw the branch you're sitting on, saw it off so you can reach for the next one. And I kept thinking about that when we created the Mrs. Myers brand.
How long after Caldria did you create that, Mrs. Myers brand?
About 18 months.
Yeah. So from concept to Caldria, how long did that take? Like just looking for investors and doing the idea. And I know that you put a lot of work into it. Because I think for you, the packaging was a big deal too for Caldria, right?
Right. Yeah, packaging is huge because we didn't have the dollars to buy shelf space. And Caldria went into, sadly, a lot of these stores are gone, but when we started, we had about 4,000 to 5,000, all these specialty gift stores, kind of like the Patinas of the world, all over the United States. And they brought it in. They brought in Caldria because, one, it's highly consumable, so they liked having the product. And two, packaging was really stunning. And it was kind of unusual to have cleaning products in these high-end gift stores. I mean, we even got into Neiman Marcus, strangely, with Caldria, because they had some housewares category. And so then that gave us time to figure out what the heck we were doing, from a manufacturing standpoint, test fragrances, see which ones resonate, and then get our feet wet a little bit with the grocery market, which is a lot more challenging. And I didn't really understand it from a brand standpoint.
Did you learn about it, or did you find somebody who does understand it? Is that important? Spreading yourself to people, right?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, what we needed to go into the grocery market was money. And we didn't have a lot of it. So we did something kind of revolutionary. Is one thing I really wanted at the grocery channel, our first objective was to pick off all the Whole Food stores. We went to Target. Target's like, not too interested. So I decided to pick off, well, Target's another story. We can talk about that later. Whole Foods, at the time, you could sell into individual stores. So we decided to put a sales team on the ground on both coasts, the East Coast and the West Coast, and really micro target those high-end, those trend-setting Whole Food stores. And at the time, we drop ship product, and then I had the merchandise coordinators go in there and set the product together as one brand. Now, if you look at the cleaning aisle, you'll see that dish goes with dish, window with window, hand soap with hand soap. I thought, if that happens to us, we're dead. We're just down on a ride. We're not doing that. So we would walk it. So when we sold it individually to the Whole Foods, they let us set all of our product line together, which was unheard of in cleaning. But I kept saying, hey, you guys do it all the time in beauty. Well, our guys and gals will come in, set the product. And so that's how we started, was picking off all the Whole Food stores and setting our product together, because we didn't have the promo dollars to compete with the Procter & Gamble's of the world.
So when you talking about packaging, was that all you, or you're like, this is how I imagine it. This is the look I want. This is the color I want. This is, did you look at data, or was this all just on instinct?
It's pretty much on instinct, but I'm a big believer in, I've worked with a lot of incredible design firms, and Minneapolis you're so fortunate. There's so much talent here. So I had a different design team for Caltria, and I had a different design team for Mrs. Myers. And I can barely draw a stick figure, so it's not like I was designing packaging.
Mm-hmm.
But I can see it in my mind's eye, so I was a big believer in tear sheets and covering walls where it kind of looks like this, it kind of feels like this. And when it came to Caltria, my inspiration was the Balthazar menu in New York. Butter yellow, very French, very European, fancy. That was Calgary. And then Mrs. Myers is named after my mom, who's still alive. She's 93, God bless. She's a homespun housewife, frugal, child with depression. So I kept saying, if we were going to devastate Calgary, how would we do it? Well, we'd bring in my mom, So this Midwestern, you have no idea. She's the drill sergeant. Bring in somebody homespun, so just kind of create a whole different brand.
I said that.
Yeah.
But she did people think that she was the Mrs. Myers of Mrs. Myers? Did she say she created it?
Yeah. I used to, when you do media training, you get her ready and say, okay, now we're going to do this media thing. I want you to have these key messages. It was a disaster. So I would just let her rip, and the reporters just gobbled her up. She's very authentic. She's very real. I come from a family of 9 kids, and she's the boss.
There you go.
And she told you like it is. So she knows how to clean a house, I tell you.
And now she has her products.
Yes.
How about scaling your business? What were some of or was there an early turning point that you can remember?
I think the first one, scaling, was getting the Williams-Sonoma contract. That immediately put us on the map. And one thing that I did is, when we were developing the fragrances, we went to a lab to see if they could produce it. One of the chemists said, hey, you should get a patent for this. And I went, for what? I just didn't even understand that. He goes, I don't know, I think you should. So I found a guy who was 3M's IP attorney. He had an MBA and an MA in organic chemistry. And he loved the concept, but I think more than anything, he loved taking on the big guys. He's like, I'm going to get you a patent. So he did, but we got a process patent for 10 years. But as a result, we got to put it on the label in mouse type, patent pending. And so the big strategic partners, anybody with a little savvy would look at that and think, ooh, these guys are a player. Well, we weren't a player, but we wanted to look like a player. So that was huge. And so the Williams-Sonoma money. And then getting Mrs. Myers, I would say, into all the Whole Foods, and then stepping to Target was the big opportunity for scaling.
Is scaling difficult, like in terms of the entrepreneur, you started it, being told, well, these are things you need to change, or this is what you need to do. Maybe they didn't quite match up to what you wanted.
Yeah, I kept my hands on the brand. That was my background. I come out of marketing. And I had great salespeople, who were better at this than I was. I sold all the time, but you have to hire a really good sales team and hire people who can do things better than you can. in terms of finance and ops. I was really on the front side of the business, marketing and sales. And so, yeah, I kind of let that go. But I know from working on brands when I had an agency that no detail is too small. If you want to create a great brand, you have got to touch everything. Not long term, but you can leave nothing to chance, really. Everything kind of matters.
Yeah. So I would say, how do you hold on to like the soul of it when it starts getting huge like that? Did that thought go through your mind? Like, there are certain things I'm not going to let go. Like, it has to represent this.
Right.
And it has to still have this feeling.
Yeah. One thing we did for Mrs. Myers, because that was really our rocket ship after about 3 years, was we created a brand book. This is what Mrs. Myers says. This is what she looks like. This is what she does. She is a neighbor who talks to you across the fence. She's the domestic mentor. So if she doesn't say this, doesn't do this, doesn't look like this, we don't do it. So everybody kind of knew what the brand was. So you can start to let go if you communicate to everybody, here's what this looks like. And so I'm a big believer in, don't leave that to chance. You've got to control that, or someone else will, to your point.
Mm-hmm. Was there ever a moment when it was growing so much that there was a risk of it like diluting what it started out as, the story, I guess?
It's more all the guerrilla marketing tactics that we did in the early days, such as we had samples. Nobody did samples in cleaning products. We had dish samples, soap samples. I would bring my mother to Kowalski's and Lund's and Byerly's, and we would get a whole weekend and we would hand out dish samples, much like that I handed out pizza and hot dogs, all that stuff. And so I couldn't do that anymore with my mom. She can't go around the United States doing that. So you start to lose a lot of the guerrilla marketing tactics because honestly, you don't have the bandwidth. You're kind of scaling. You need to take those dollars and put them somewhere else. We also had this trailer. It was just awesome. But we should probably have 10 of them that we used to take to music festivals in Embarcadero in San Francisco, into New York City. And it was like a kitchen. And my mom would hang out the window and hand out samples. So that's what you lose when you scale. That's difficult to replicate and it's expensive to do. But it was in the beginning.
Yeah, I bet it does. It's a personal touch, really, right?
Yeah.
So why don't we talk about how did the acquisition come about?
Sure.
How long were you there? How long did you have your company? And what was the approach?
So I ran the company for 9 years before we were acquired by SEJ. And it was interesting listening to the panel at 11 about exits because it's so true. I was approached by so many private equity and venture capital people. And I didn't even talk to them because they're so distracting. And I'd go to a trade show and just be mobbed. And I started keeping an Excel document there. I just kept all their cards. And I asked every one of them the following question and never got a good answer. So for you, private equity people, please listen to this. What can you do for us that we can't do for ourselves? And would you like to know the answer? They just stare at me. I was like, how about a bucket of money? I don't know. But it's interesting. I thought, I'm going to wait to be acquired until someone answers that question. And I think it's kind of interesting. So SEJ answered the question, which was global distribution. Mm-hmm. Well, now I'm kind of jazzed, right? I mean, sure, I want a bucket of money, but more importantly, I want this brand to live on. We put our heart and soul into it. To me, we could scale it even bigger than we could. And these guys could turn that on a dime. So that was very attractive to me. So, we went from, angel investors, probably 12 of them, to a strategic buyer because I really thought they could help us the best scale. And now it's a huge brand for SEJ.
How did it feel after? How did you feel?
Sad.
Yeah.
It's bittersweet. Yeah, it's bittersweet, especially when it's your mom.
Yeah.
Right? Selling your mom. Selling your mom. No, so one time,
so much into it.
I know.
It's like giving birth. I had to. It's like
a
baby, kind of, right?
It's totally selling your child, without question. So at one time, we thought it was Mr. Meyer's line. We were going to do a garage line. Mm-hmm. So I got my dad kind of jazzed about doing it. He's a mechanical engineer. He thought he was.
Here's my moment.
Oh my God! I got tired of watching my wife be the star. And so I had to call my parents to tell them I sold the company. Oh, that was hard. And my dad said, "Oh, there won't be a Mr. Myers. He's here to sell."
So now you'll make it up to him. I'm sure you have. You're now in the position of mentoring and investing. So what do you look at?
Well, I'm a lousy investor. I'm glad there's a lot of good angel investors out here because I was terrible at it. I've invested in about 5 to 6 companies and I haven't made a dime yet, I'm going to be honest. And I think it's because my mentality is from an entrepreneur branding. I'm a big product geek, marketing person, and I don't know how to do investing, to be honest.
Well, you do tell. I know that you were talking about products out there, and you're saying you look at something that makes your life easier, better, and more enjoyable.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, a lot of early stage ideas come to me. Especially, I just did the how I built this, and a lot of people came out of the woodwork with, I got this idea and that idea. And really, what I saw over and over are item businesses. And what I mean by that is one item. They're not disrupting the category. They don't think through their line extension, how they're going to go to market. And every time I'd ask them any question, they're just like, well, I have this one idea. It's a plant, and it just, to me, it was a failure of imagination that you can't think bigger. You should, if you're going to the consumer market, that's my world, and they always ask me, how do I get into Target? And I said, well, have you been to Target lately? Have you looked online? Well, no. Well, that's a problem. You need to go to Target and understand how they think about things.
Can you quickly tell the story about your the diaper man?
Oh, so after Guy Raz, this guy approached me on LinkedIn, and I usually respond to everybody, give 30 minutes, and he called me up. He goes, I have an idea that's going to revolutionize the baby industry. I'm like, all right, lay it on me. He goes, a diaper smasher. And I went, what? He goes, yeah, you take it's like a potato smasher. You open up the bin where the diapers are and you smash it in. I mean, I thought, okay, I'm just thinking the baby's crying. It's full of what. You got to put it. Now, not only do you have to go wash your hands, but you got to wash the diaper thing. I said, where do you store it after you smash the diapers? Well, he didn't know. Anyway, I said to him, this is an item business. Like my son-in-law said, I got a diaper smasher. But it's a failure to me of imagination. Think bigger, think bigger, think bigger, think bigger. Yeah.
So you're talking about Target. So
yeah.
So go ahead.
Well, Target. Okay, we went into Target prematurely. They wanted to do, and I know Target quite well. I used to work for them. They would often invite us to come and give trend reports on what we saw on the flea market. And so we agreed to a 250 store test. We totally failed. And I decided to pull myself out before they kicked me out. Because I thought, I know we're not making our numbers. They'll tell you, what you need to sell off the end cap. And so
this is Myers?
This is Myers.
Really? Yeah.
Well, it was pre-Whole Foods.
Okay.
So then after I pulled ourselves out of Target, I decided to go after Whole Foods and just get in there and go after all the high-end grocery stores. And Target looks around to see who's selling what, where are they going. And I thought if we could get out that distribution, then Target would be more enticing to Target.
Their attention.
And so then they asked me to come back. So I kept going and presenting our progress. I never asked for the PO. And then all of them they said, hey, we want you back. I think you guys are ready. And they were right. We were ready. And so we failed there, but we got our act together and had more dollars to invest when we went back into Target.
I know you've done a lot of mentoring too, consulting. Yeah. Just curious, you mentioned that there is a lot of money out there to be invested.
Yeah, I mean, you guys know this better than I do, especially in the consumer product. I think the folks that I talked to on the West Coast, where I've done a couple of angel investment deals, they said there's a lot of money sitting on the sideline, but the problem with consumer, it's so oversaturated, and the focus is really not on the revenue side, but really on the profitability side. So a lot of these small startups, that are, I had a guy who's like, I'm going to do this butt ball. I'm like, do we really need another ball? I don't know. Let's just think bigger, in terms of what we really need, or think about a category much differently. So that's kind of what I see. But there's a lot of money sitting on the sidelines, without question. You guys probably know all this better than I do.
So have you invested in any startups? I know that you said you're not.
I have. I'm terrible at that.
Well,
I'm going to be honest. I think it's because I don't understand the deal structure. I think I should have either invested in 60 or zero. Really go after it, really focus on being an angel investor. I have worked with private equity firms. They'll bring me in to say, hey, what do you think of this category? I think it's a better role for me than putting my own money in it. I just lost too much money doing it. It's not my skill set, to be honest.
You're creative.
Exactly.
So, what do you wish more people would ask you about then? Because you do have people coming to you all the time.
I wish they would ask me what the downside is. I find a lot of people don't think through the downside risk. And can you live, and if these three things happen, can you live with that? And I'll say, strangely, that's one skill. When I was in nursing, I was like either in the ER, the surgical intensive care unit. I was in high stress, life or death situation, and we were always going, ooh, if this, then that. We were always scenario playing to keep these people alive. And so when I got to business, I was kind of doing triage. And I don't think people think through the downside. If this happens, what are you going to do? So I see that a lot. Failure of imagination is the second thing I see. And then the lack of, they think they're going to, scale a business in 2 years and sell it to Procter & Gamble for, $200 million. That's just not happening anymore. Not in consumer products. Beverage, I see it. Yeah.
In beverage?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen that too. You just mentioned disrupting categories. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure.
What do you mean by that?
Well, okay, so let's take Mrs. Meyer's and Caldria. Here's a big, huge commodity market that are problem solution. I got a dirty window, I spray it with Windex. I got grease on my skillet, I have Dawn. Item business going after big markets, just like the diaper business. And I thought this could be completely disruptive by taking all the cleaners and making them basil, lavender pine, citrus mint light, and really looking at it as a personal care business. And I'm a big believer in stealing pages from other industries, in particular fashion and beauty. They have to be out there doing creative, leading edge things day in and day out. And I thought, if you look to see what they're doing, you can kind of get a sense of what's going to happen in big commodity markets, especially for consumer products. So I think that's kind of how I always thought about it, is to look to other industries to see what they're doing and then steal a page so you could kind of rewrite your own history with that.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
The big picture.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. I used to keep an Excel document, and I call it, you got to connect the dots, but you can't connect the dots if you don't have any dots, right? And so you got to get some dots. How do you get dots? You do some storage. You go online, you walk around, and you ask yourself, what's happening in fashion? What's happening in home decor? What's happening in all these industries? And see if you can find a red thread. And it used to be that, home decor chased fashion 2 years. Well, everything's being condensed, in terms of fashion items because everything's so fast right now. So I think it's easier to connect the dots. It's just a lot faster. And the other thing you have to think about, if you're sitting on the shelf of Target, those decisions were made 2 years ago. So you're already late, trying to think of how to disrupt something. So you got to be way ahead in terms of your thinking to disrupt a consumer category, in my mind.
I wanted to bring this up earlier, but this Caldria wasn't your first business. I didn't realize that you did a watch while you were.
Yeah, I've had some failures.
Yes. But you learned from them, right?
Yeah. Oh, totally. So when we had our marketing agency, Kilter, we had a big client watch station. And at the time, there was this huge gulf between a Swatch watch and a Rolex. So we thought, well, we're geniuses, we'll just make a watch. And stupidly, we thought, oh, it's so beautiful, people won't meet a path to your door. Well, it was completely ignorant and idiotic that we thought that. So we shut that down rather quickly. But yeah, what did I learn from that? I said, if I ever get a product company, I am not coming home until I've got a fistful of POs. Not doing it. I learned from that. You're going to sell a lot of revenue.
Is there, when you look back at your journey, is there something that you went through or the experience that still kind of gives you the goosebumps that just makes you excited?
Yeah, when you're going 80 miles an hour in a startup, you don't have a lot of time to think like, oh, this worked, but that didn't work. It's like, go, go, go. And I was in a big, huge store, a Central Market store in, oh gosh, where are they? Texas. And we were supposed to do this big laundry display, with all this Mrs. Meyer's product. And I'm racing through the store with my salesperson. I said, where's the promo? We spent where's the promo? I'm barking at her. And she goes, turn around. And there it was, in all its glory, this huge display. And I'm getting goosebumps now. Because that was like the image I had in my mind's eye of what this category, what this business could do. So yeah, that gives me goosebumps.
What's your next step? I know do you ever think, are you constantly thinking about, oh, this would be a great product. This would make my life easier, or consumers' lives easier, or do you do that all the time?
I do all that all the time. Yeah. I'm not sure it's wise. Because I started another company I had to shut down because I thought, oh, that's brilliant. It was. So I'm better on the advisory side. And I like products. I like retail. I go around. I still like stores. I'm online. Sure, I look, but I'm not going to come into another startup.
You think that's important, like being in tune with the comings and goings? I think you said that, don't do this if you're not into that.
Oh, yeah.
If you're not paying attention.
These people come to me with an idea they want to take a Target, and I said, have you been to Target? No. Well, you got to walk around. You got to look around and see how they price things, what they're next to, what their adjacencies are, what crap is on the clearance aisle, what failed there. The more you're on the street, the more you learn in anything you do. You gotta walk around.
What do you say when people come to you and they want you to invest, or they want your advice? It's someone who's starting out.
Yeah.
What's your most important, you think, your initial?
Well, first I say, can I see your executive summary? Because a lot of people come to me, and I used to say yes to everyone. And then I'd say, hey, can I see your one-page executive summary? And they go, oh, yeah, well, I don't have it. I said, well, just email it to me. Do you know how many emails I've gotten back?
Really?
0.
It's shocking. They want you to invest with it.
They want some advice. Even the diaper smasher guy. I said, what?
Forever known as
I need you to reinvent the baby category. And I said, well, how big is the baby business? He didn't know. That's a problem. You should be rattling off those numbers faster than I could say it. Come prepared. I see that a lot of people come unprepared and want me to help them figure it out. Well, I'm not going to do that. I don't help people when they get it figured out. At least get an executive summary and go, here's where I'm going, here's how big the category is, here's our strategy, here's our competitors. Year 1, we're doing this, year 2, we're doing that. You can put that on one page. I'm happy to see that. I'd love that. Someone brought that to me.
When you look back on where you are and what all you've done, did you ever think when you were growing up in Iowa, did you think of yourself as, I want to get into business? I know you were a nurse and all that, but was there in your youth anything that showed that you had that sort of a mind? I know that you worked a lot of jobs. You worked cleaning jobs too.
I was in a beauty parlor and a trailer park. I was a truck stop waitress. I was a secretary in the emergency room. So I've had a lot of
life experience.
Crazy kind of jobs. Yeah. I like working. That was the thing I really loved. I loved working. And, the family of 9, working is your ticket out of the Thunderdome, right? You can make money, get away from your parents. And my mom and dad were all about, you get a job, get out of here. That was it, yeah.
Well, when you what gave you the confidence to start the company, to start Caltria?
I could just see it. It was so clear in my mind's eye. It was like that display. It was a gut feeling, even when you're at the lowest point.
Yeah.
Even when you feel like, oh my God, I lost Target, I lost this, nothing's working, we don't have any money. I just thought, it's gonna work.
And your husband, who you were married to since college?
No, I should have left years ago.
Because that was got a lot of support from him.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, got a lot of support. He was our finance and ops guy. He's the finance guy. So he ran far more paranoid than I did about money, especially cash flow, which was not flowing. Yeah, let's just say.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you'd like to touch on that you think is really important to these investors who are here?
Well, I think what's really cool is I sat through the 11 o'clock session, and so one guy up there said, you could have put all the angel investors up the stage. Well, I don't know where they were, but I honestly think this is awesome. I went all over the country looking for money, and now look at all these people are sitting here. This is phenomenal. I'm proud of everybody who's ever doing this. This is awesome.
So when you went out and you were a female in this sort of man's world,
Yeah.
right? So that had to be tough.
Yeah, I had one guy, they said, oh yeah, he loves consumer deals. I go over there and I walk into his office. He's got a huge credenza of photos of Arabian horses. And I think, okay. And so he spends the next hour telling me about a stud farm. I thought, this is completely irrelevant. But you listen politely. I had one guy tell me in a cloud of smoke that here's how I work. He went to the financials in the back of my business plan and said, if you make these numbers in 2 years, I'll give you back $1 million I invest and you can own the formulas. And I thought, well, I'm not doing that. Yeah. And then, of course, I got painted with the brush of, oh, other female investors came here. They failed. You're going to fail just like them. And I thought, I bet they don't say that to guys. I just have a feel they don't say that to guys.
So you learned something from that, though.
Always.
The formula, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. The guy at the pot of smoke said, I own the formulas. And I walked out there going, oh, I didn't know you could own the formulas. Good idea. So even though that was, a disastrous meeting, I went, okay, I got to own the formulas. And that's what led me to get the patent pending from the extreme attorney. So yeah, no matter how terrible the meeting is, you got to take it because you'll learn stuff. And I was really hitting a brick wall raising money until I changed my strategy because most of these guys would sit across from me and look at me like, what are you talking about?
I didn't get it.
You're so, really? So I changed my strategy. I went, I'm not asking you for money. You're wise, you're really smart. You just give me an overview of what you think of my business. And then I just like to walk out there with 3 names. And for some reason, that gave me a lot of comfort that I wasn't grabbing for the wallet. So, I gained a little traction. I got more names in my funnel, if you will, to call people.
In context.
Yeah.
That's a smart way to go out and do that. Ask for a little help.
Ask for a little help. And I went further doing that than asking directly for investment.
Well, this has been extremely interesting. I know that a lot of they might have questions. I have questions, but I just like your journey and you just seem. Were you ever down? Because you just seem like a positive person. Like I'm not going to take no as the beginning of the conversation and all that.
I get down. Totally get down. Yeah, you gotta. I always say when you get down, you gotta put on your night goggles. And what's your night goggles? Your mission. When you get down and you want to cry in your car, you gotta get your night goggles on. Yeah, that's right.
Thank you from a fellow Iowan, first off. Question, Brian, founder at the 11 o'clock session, and you both touched on grief or sadness and selling. What advice would you give to founders in the room to prepare themselves for that time when they do that transition and sell their business?
Well, I think one thing you can do, we knew we were going to sell because we had such interest in the company. And then SEJ, in our first trade show booth, right after I started, they would hold meetings in our booth. I honestly had to kick them out because, they're big fragrance people because of the Glade business. So I knew I really just knew from day one they would be interested. But I always tell early, especially entrepreneurs, when they go, well, I'm going to exit to this person. I never once thought about that because you know what you're doing? You're looking sideways. The minute you look sideways, you're doomed. So first of all, don't get caught up in all those private equity, those VC guys calling around going, oh my God, what's my, Take their name, put it on your list, and get down and sell more stuff. That's what I tell everybody. Right? Yeah. So the other thing is get your financials in order. Get 3 years of audited financial statements, clean up your back end on your ops side. So when they come in, not only are they impressed with all your fragrance magic and your marketing genius, they're like, oh, they can run it back in too. Because what they're doing is they're looking for pennies on the floor. You know, when they come in, that's what they're good at. You know, they're not good at this marketing fragrance stuff. They just think it's kind of magic.
What about the grief though of
The
like,
grief.
yeah, letting go of the
It's hard.
to take a little time, a little step back, or
Yeah.
did you push forward and jump into something else?
Yeah, I did. I pushed forward and jumped into something else that was stupid.
Yeah.
But then I still, I still rearrange the bottles on shelves. I do. And there's somebody who did that with me and my daughter. Tessa, right over there. She was our third child, and she went around. She lived in a warehouse, and we still rearranged the bottles. So, I don't know. I guess grief is processed so individually. I don't know how to answer that. Yeah. Go ahead.
So earlier, Chuck talked about if you could do one thing over when he started his company was to invest in the brand. And you were obviously really already doing that kind of filter. You understood brand. You invested in great design firms you mentioned before. So what can you share with founders or angel investors here about the importance of brand early on?
If you're in any business, in my opinion, and we actually did some work for a software company, and we created a really amazing brand for them, and they got higher evaluation. You're a fool if you do not invest in your brand. I'll just cut to the quick, because that's your face of the company, and it's gotta be enticing and sexy and motivating and appropriate for the category, and it turns heads. Let's be honest. You'll have a trade show booth, and if you show up differently, like we did it, we had a Mrs. Meyer's trailer. You know, my mom hung out the window. We brought them to the Natural Products Expo West. And I knew it was a hit when our competitor said, I'm going to spray paint that thing tonight when you go home. I thought, yeah, you are. But brand is everything. It's so important. And there's so much talent here. And even if you, let's say you can't afford, you know, at least get the basics right. Get your logo, color palette, and then stick to it. Don't be constantly making tweaks along the way. Invest in it early, and it's everything. That's a good question.
Yeah.
People think, oh, I'll get started and then I'll slap a logo on it. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
If you look at all the companies that get great valuation, they have one heck of a brand. And I had seen that in my marketing career, so I kind of knew that was the play.
I got a quick question here in the back.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So you mentioned your angel investments have not gone quite the way you wanted, but you had a couple of angels to help you start. Can you give us a story of what like the best angels were able to provide or how they provided it, as well as potentially some of the worst situations for this group to understand it now?
I had a great angel investor on the second tranche because he was CEO of Calphalon Cookware. And so he had gone into Williams-Sonoma, scaled that business, went into Target, scaled it, went into Walmart, scaled it. So he had gone ahead of me in terms of all these retails. So while his, what should I say? He was kind of rough to work with. There's a lot of diamonds in the cow pie, as I always told myself. You know, sometimes someone's screaming at the phone. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to hang up the phone and say, what was good about that? A few things. I learned a lot from this guy. So that's awesome. When someone is in the category, they've gone before you, that's huge. A lousy angel investor is someone who doesn't know the category, doesn't know the industry, and is meddlesome.
That makes sense.
And I didn't have a lot of that. I'm going to be really honest. I didn't have a lot of that. Yeah.
Said that like working. What are you working on?
I like working. What am I working on? I'm actually writing a book about my journey.
I'll buy it.
Okay.
Got
We're
one.
right for sale.
I can't choose it yet.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
It is a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there anybody else? It's like Phil Donahue, if you remember Phil Donahue.
Oh, yeah. I'm not old.
So your background in a major retailer and then, in the creative agencies, it gave you this leg up, right? I Where do you see other opportunity knowing this local economy, people who have expertise, that if they kind of made the jump, the opportunities for investors in our backyard that maybe we're under leveraging?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, if you look at the Fortune 100 companies here, you've got 3M, you have these big, huge companies. And, if I was looking for how to leverage that, I would figure out what their operating divisions were doing, what looks interesting, what's not. Probably put my nose in a lot of annual reports of publicly traded companies and figure out what they're doing. There's a lot of talent here. There really is a lot of talent. And now that there's this group here, that makes it even more attractive, in my opinion. A lot of it is just footwork.
That's what it sounds
Doing the work, researching, reading, studying, going down rabbit holes online. Learn a lot.
Hi, my name is Haley. Sorry, in the back. I'm a founder of Communiful, bringing professional community together here in the Twin Cities. And I had a question about how far you think we've come with respect to female founders and funders. I know back in the 2010s when I was raising money, I did have experiences where, my male counterpart, co-founder, was asked all the questions and sort of paid all the attention. I had to kind of lean in. So I was just curious kind of how you've seen that progressing in the years since you were raising.
I wish I could say it progressed a lot, but one stat I read when I was working on the book is that I think Forbes just published that female founders receive less than 2% of all VC funds. However, the same study showed that female-led teams are highly more effective, i.e. shareholder return on value. So something isn't squaring here, right? I think you can look at all the reasons why someone tells you no, and you can get caught up in that. But at the end of the day, I'm in the female body. I need some money. I'm gonna hell or high water. I'm gonna figure out how to get it. So I know a lot of people don't like when I say this, but I like being an underdog. Always. Because you're completely underestimated along the way. And that's a huge advantage, especially when you get with all these big consumer products that strut into your trade show booth and tell you you're a complete idiot. I'm like, okay, I know what you're afraid of now. They just show me their hand. Where I come from, when you play cards, you express the cards. Right? It's hard. I wish I could say it's butterflies and rainbows. It's not.
But do you see it growing? Like, it's slow.
It sounds like
you
it.
know?
You guys don't need. What did you say?
Did it?
Yeah,
Really?
yeah,
She
that's
was
sad.
just saying it decreased last year. The amount of money going to female founders was less last year than it's been.
Well, what problem you have is, especially on the consumer side, you have typically all men on the investment side who don't really understand a lot of the consumer brands, whereas most consumer brands, 80% are purchased by women. So you would think they would welcome that perspective. I wish I had a better answer. Sorry.
Any other questions?
Yes.
You talked a little bit about the transition from guerrilla marketing as your business grew all of a sudden to hiring the sales team from coast to coast to support that growth. Was that mostly fueled by taking in working capital, or like that's a pretty big shift, right? When you're like hustling, like trying all the scrappy things, which I relate to on so many fronts. But I guess, how did you handle that transition, and what guided you on making those strategic choices?
Well, we were very fortunate to have that private label business from Williams-Sonoma. It was, a multi-million-dollar contract that came in the house. And they were, at the time, remember, they were landlocked to 250 stores. So I didn't really have to compete with them, but they added a lot of cachet. But yeah, it's very difficult. So we put aside a chunk of money. The board agreed to put an on-ground sales team for Mrs. Myers on the East and West Coast. And they said, if you can't prove this is going to win, we're killing that brand. So that was a threat I thought, that's real. And I thought, we're going to make this work. Because I didn't really want somebody else coming in and knocking off the concept after we had kind of trained an upscale consumer that she could have fragrance, earth-friendly, beautiful packaging. I didn't let somebody else do that after we kind of invented that whole thing. Because I really only had one competitor at the time, and that was Method. And they were really a Target. And people thought they were a private label for Target, which was fine with me. I thought, that's fine. We were so radically different from them. It's hard. I'm just going to be really honest. But with rep groups, it's not a lot of cash outlay. You might be a little more on the margin side, but at least they can give you coverage with these big retailers. There's a lot of things we didn't add in the beginning. Like we couldn't have people to go around to the stores and make sure that if they said they were going to set a whole end cap of Mrs. Myers, did they really set the end cap? I called it the last golden mile. It's one thing to get your product into Target. It's quite enough for somebody to rip open a box and make sure you've got 6 dish soap where they're supposed to be. That's a whole other thing. You got to check the last mile. It's really important. So it gets to the consumer. Yes.
Is there a mic?
Not a. Oh.
Oh, wait, somebody else asked a question.
Looks like there's multiple people.
Why don't we go ahead and start with the gentleman in the back who has the mic?
Got you, there, right.
So hold on. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Testing? Perfect. Now that you're on the investor side, were there any feelings of resentment that you had as a founder that you understand better now that you're on the investor side as an investor? And what advice would you give to your founder self raising capital now that you're on the investor side?
Resentment.
Or anger, or, feeling like they don't get my company, or...
I got to be honest, I didn't have time for that. I had to raise a bucket of money really fast. And if you get angry or pissy with yourself, you're just going to waste all this energy, right? And I just think it should be super positive. You have a goal, you have your night goggles on. Chase it, go for it. And you get angry. Sure, I get pissed, but you can't even believe the stuff people say to you. I think you just I get the drill because it's so funny too. I looked at it. I had 5 brothers, okay? I grew up in a family of punches and flying zucchinis and stuff, so it took a lot to rattle me. So I didn't get angry too often. I kind of use it as fuel, if you will.
To put those stories in your book.
Yeah.
And Monica and Meyer, we'll go to our right here in the second. This will be our final question.
Oh, this is our final question, Nick.
Hi, my name's Nick. I focus on empowering underestimated entrepreneurs and underserved communities. And one of the things that we talk about is finding balance. What advice do you have on finding balance when trying to grow your business?
I think that's absolute bullshit. I've been asked this question all the time, and I say the same thing. I didn't have any balance. I was working 80 hours a week. I was thrilled that my 2 daughters would recognize me at the end of 4 months after being on the sales road. When you're going for something, I didn't even think about that. I'm going to be honest. It's I don't think it exists in nature. I'm just saying. For me, I'm speaking from my standpoint.
And there you go.
That's
That's just the final words.